Disclaimer: this video contains graphic descriptions and was created for educational purposes only. Viewers' discretion is advised. James Whitey Bulger waited patiently in his cold cell for yet another transfer. He was one of the most difficult prisoners to manage even at the age of 89. He was once on the FBI's list of 10 most wanted fugitives, just behind Osama bin Laden. A man of his caliber seemed untouchable even in prisons. But his last 24 hours shocked the whole of West Virginia. On October 30, 2018, the 89-year-old was found in his cell in a pool of blood. His face was unrecognizable. It appeared as if someone had also tried to gouge out his eyes and cut off his tongue. Was this some kind of bizarre ritual? What really happened at the penitentiary in Hazleton? Welcome to Creepy True Cases. Take a second to subscribe for more updated and rarely seen true crime stories. It all began at the Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma City, where James Whitey Bulger was temporarily transferred to wait for clearance for yet another transfer. He had been moved around severally from one prison to the other, and it had only been 5 days since he arrived at the FDC. He was formerly at the Coleman Federal Correctional Complex when the officials decided that he needed to be moved again. But why was Whitey such a big deal? Here's a bit of background. Whitey was a former mob boss who led the Winter Hill Gang and was wanted for years by the FBI for several high-profile crimes, including 18 counts of murder, racketeering, conspiracy, extortion, and narcotics distribution. Coleman, too, a federal prison in Florida, had been Whitey's home for at least 4 years. It provided a safe environment for high-risk inmates, and for someone like Whitey, a publicly known FBI informant, who was definitely in need of protection. The problem was, within the confines of Coleman Penitentiary, Whitey had created a loyal community around himself. His influence had spread throughout the prison. He had inmates who would steal food and snacks from the dining hall and bring them to him in his cell. After some time, another transfer became necessary, especially due to disciplinary issues. It was written in Whitey's records that he spent some time in the hospital facility because of a few health scares, but this was untrue. He had actually been placed in solitary confinement for almost 8 months. Whitey had once threatened a nurse, saying, "Your day of reckoning is coming." Bulger was a difficult prisoner to control, and for many in the system he was a thorn in their flesh. His case was sensitive because any incident that concerned him would immediately make headlines. He was passed from one penitentiary to the other as no one wanted to have to deal with him, given his records of indiscipline. It was finally decided that Bulger was going to be transferred to USP Hazleton, West Virginia, one of the toughest prisons in the U.S. This choice wasn't exactly ideal for many reasons. The prison was known for its excessive violence, overcrowding, and low staffing. But the biggest reason why such a place was a huge red flag for prisoners like Bulger was that it was a high-risk place for prisoners who were labeled informants and mob defectors. Bulger was publicly known as a mob leader who became an informant for the FBI. Though he vehemently denied it in court, the FBI stated that he had provided useful information on the Patriarca crime family, a rival mafia group based in Boston and Providence. The exposure had caused a great embarrassment for government agencies and also placed Bulger in the crosshairs of other crime organizations. Bulger was given 2 life sentences plus 5 years. His sentence began in November 2013, and since then he had been moved around until he was transferred to Hazleton. This would be his very last transfer. At 8 a.m. in October 2018, Bulger was awakened by officers who came to prepare him for his transfer. He understood the routine as he had been moved so many times. He was thoroughly searched and prepped, with handcuffs and guards on each side. He was then led out to the transport vehicle as he began a journey that he would never return from. Bulger was conveyed in his wheelchair as metal doors were struck, and the chaotic voices of inmates followed. Bulger was no longer the man he used to be. At age 89, he had developed a few health problems such as high blood pressure, heart disease, and poor vision. He was able to stand when necessary, but his legs had become frail, so he could no longer walk. Bulger's transfer was a quiet one. He sat, staring into the distance, ignoring all military activity around him. This was formerly one of the most dangerous men you could meet. His words once held so much power, and his legacy was one of violence, blood, and dishonor. He had amassed so many enemies that the very news of his presence required ample security, and Hazleton awaited his arrival, both the staff and the prisoners. The transfer was supposed to be discreet, but it was anything but that. The staff had carelessly discussed his arrival in the presence of inmates, and in no time, the inmates were discussing the same thing. News of Bulger's arrival spread like wildfire. This was a clear violation of the transfer protocol and placed Bulger in danger. Later on, investigators found messages and phone records, informing inmates about Bulger's arrival, showing that some staff had tipped them off. At around 6:20 p.m., Whitey Bulger was conveyed through the entrance of the prison in his wheelchair, and whispers began to spread, "Whitey is here." A sudden energy rushed through the yard as inmates became animated as Bulger was moved past their cell. Bulger was quickly profiled, and the threat level was labeled "Great." Bulger told the prison officials that he wasn't connected to any of the gangs in this particular prison, nor did he have issues with any of them. But then he made a request that sealed his fate. He asked to be placed among the general population, rather than solitary confinement, which was considered much safer for a man of his reputation. When officers asked if he needed protection from any particular group in this new location, he simply replied, "No." Whether he was lying or just an overconfident oversight, we may never know, but the population at Hazleton was unlike any other. At 9:53 p.m., the wardens had locked Bulger in his cell, amid the mocking howls of prisoners in various other cells. This was a normal welcome tradition and wasn't anything personal. But when inmates began to chorus words like "rat," it became obvious that they all knew who he was, and his stay was going to be quite unpleasant. But nothing prepared the warders for what happened next. Bulger was originally placed in the same cell with another prisoner named Paul J. DiCalogero, an associate of the DiCalogero gang in Massachusetts. After an hour, Bulger was removed from that cell and suspiciously taken to a new cell with a different cellmate. It wasn't clear if this was intentional to protect him or if it was an instruction from someone higher in the chain of command. Bulger was then placed with Felix Wilson, a 26-year-old man serving a 30-month sentence for illegal firearm, with no affiliation with any gangs. As curious as this switch was, many prisoners on Bulger's side of the prison were members of the Genovese mob, and they had a deep hatred for informants like Bulger. However, Bulger's case was peculiar. He wasn't just an informant, he also manipulated the FBI, feeding them selective information for years and pointing them in the direction of mobs that he had a problem with in exchange for their immunity. This allowed him to commit heinous criminal acts without repercussions. Many argued that he should have been placed in solitary confinement until the officers were sure of his reception, but this was already too late. In the early hours of October 30, 2018, prison doors were unlocked as warders guided inmates to move to the halls for breakfast. Bulger's cellmate left immediately as if tipped off about what was about to happen next. At 6:19 a.m., surveillance cameras picked up something unusual. Two men identified as Focio Hayes and Paul J. DiCalogero entered Bulger's cell, but no alarms were raised, especially as none of the staff spotted the movement early enough. The prison was highly understaffed, and a whole section was manned by only 2 correctional officers. Another inmate, Sean McKinnon, stood outside as a lookout while the 2 men carried out their deeds. Reports stated that the 2 men tried to gouge out Bulger's eyes and cut off his tongue, as a symbol of retaliation for giving out information to the enemy. Bulger was smothered in a blanket, and his head was placed on a pillow as though he was taking a nap. The murder took exactly 7 minutes, but remained unnoticed until around 8:20 a.m. when staff changed shifts. The 89-year-old was found lifeless in his cell, bleeding out. His injuries were severe and he was greatly disfigured. A quick call was placed for an ambulance, and medics rushed to save his life, but to no avail. Bulger was declared dead at 9:04 a.m. His death was avoidable and riddled with controversies. What are your thoughts on this highly suspicious murder? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.